out to take her son to school, that there are people walking in the neighborhood and chatting and talking. And she came from Tampa. She came from a very nice neighborhood, but she just had forgotten the feel of Temple Terrace.
It's got that small town feel.
Absolutely.
What brought you to Temple Terrace many years ago?
My husband was a teacher at King High School, and we were living in a very tiny little house with baby number 3 on the way. And we said, you know, we on Sunday afternoons, we would go for a ride in Temple Terrace and take the kids to the Dairy Queen, which, by the way, is still there, and drive down those beautiful streets. And then it was time for our kids to start to go to school, and we knew that Temple Terrace was a good place for that. So we gravitated to that area. Now, I can tell you that my family, who still lived in Seminole Heights, said, "You're going way out there."
Yeah, it was so far away back then.
I was way out in the sticks as far as they were concerned. But
it's funny what the definition of far away in the sticks has become over the years.
Oh, yes. My mother still says, "People really live in Odessa?"
Yeah, Odessa's actually growing. Odessa's quite expensive these days.
Expensive, yes. But she still thinks of it as lake after lake after lake with just a few lake houses on it. Yeah, that's how it was with Temple Terrace. We fell in love with the city. We looked at several houses, and we could see that it was going to be a place that our kids could have that same benefit that we had growing up in a neighborhood, being able to walk to school, walk to the library, ride their bicycle, go to the parks. We have so many parks and playgrounds in Temple Terrace. There was always some place for them to go. And so that.
And when you first moved there, was new construction at the time, right?
Oh, no, we didn't move there until 76.
Okay.
All the big boom happened in the 50s.
Gotcha.
So, and I do live in one of those mid-century, now they're calling them, houses. So,
and what did you call it? Mediterranean?
Revival.
Describe to the person listening what a Mediterranean revival home looks like, Tim.
Okay, well,
because it was funny, we were talking about it and I had to Google it, and I noticed some distinct features like the beautiful arches and
there's lots of arches.
The Spanish flair.
There's terracotta clay tiles on most of them. Back when the original homes were built,
That's true.
The tile was imported from Cuba. It was all 100-year-old tile. So it's a lot of you see it around Tampa too, besides just in Temple Terrace, but there's lots of arches. There's like my house, it's got stucco that's like 1.5 inches or 2 inches thick, so it has this very old world kind of charm and feel to it.
Now, being part of like the Preservation Society, if you will, I'm gonna keep calling that the wrong thing, but is that some of the things you guys are trying to do, is preserve some of that architecture in some of those homes?
Mm-hmm. One of our initiatives that's pretty much at the forefront right now is we're partnering with the city to try to move Temple Terrace toward becoming what's called a certified local government. Basically, a certified local government. I'm going to kind of give you the.
I was going to say, what does it take to actually get that designation? Is it designation?
It is, but basically the city just has to decide to become one. They basically have to craft a preservation ordinance and establish a board that oversees the functions and executes what the CLG program is designed to do.
CLG means?
Certified Local Government.
Okay, thank you.
By definition, that is, a CLG is a program that was enacted as part of the National Historic Preservation Act amendments of 1980, and basically what it does is it links the local, state, and federal governments at different levels in a partnership for preservation-related initiatives. It's like to protect historic homes and designate them as such.
And there's some benefits that come with that too, right? For homeowners and
the city and like groups like the Preservation Society. As far as homeowners go, the program that we're trying to get the city or the basis of the ordinance for them to craft would be that it would be a volunteer thing. So it's like somebody like me that lives in a historic home, I could go to the city and request being considered for historic designation. And then if I was to restore my house, let's say my house is worth $200,000 and I put in $100,000 worth of restorations, I can get tax relief on that $100,000 in improvements for up to like 10 years if that's the way the city crafts the ordinance.
Tax relief, like meaning on your property taxes?
Right.
Gotcha.
So there's also the city itself, as well as nonprofits like our group, would have the opportunity to have access to preservation-related grants that, without the city being a CLG, we don't have access to. We can't get at. So those are the two primary benefits.
And with that kind of thing, you guys would restore some public buildings and older buildings and that type of stuff?
We don't have any public buildings that actually fall in that historic range, with the exception of one. And that building is presently on the campus of Florida College. But it would definitely help us in maintaining that level. You know, being able to say, oh, no, we want to make sure that it retains that historic value, if you will.
Absolutely. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. We have to take a real quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the mission behind Temple Terrace, and also we're going to talk about Bertha Palmer. She had a big influence and impact on what we know as Temple Terrace today, and Tim's going to tell us all about that when we come back after the break. Back in a minute.
By the way, do you watch Hell on Wheels? Bertha Palmer is a main character.
Bertha Palmer
really?
is on
Yeah.
Hell on Wheels?
Yes, and she is like a kink-butt woman who owns property and argues with the real estate about whether the train should come to this part of town. Or
Oh my gosh, we should talk about that. That's great radio.
Yeah.
I love that. It really is.
She was
Are they on
just-
local channels or?
No, it's in the AMC.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never watch TV, so I have to specifically look for it.
Who would have thought Bertha Palmer would be on that?
Well, she was a big.
We're gonna have
part
to
of-
run right back to the extra break and talk about all this on air, just because we're gonna run out of time if we don't. You start a little late.
We'll be ready.
It's all Chris's fault. Welcome back. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. In studio today, we have Tim Lancaster and Sherry Donahue, both residents of Temple Terrace. They bring a lot of highlight and feature and just amazing stories they're going to tell about Temple Terrace, the community, the way it is, the way it was, and what your vision is going forward. So Tim, tell us a little bit about the history of Temple Terrace. Since you know so much about it, I learned so much talking to you the other day. It's amazing.
Okay, well, I guess our little story started with Bertha Palmer, who was a world-renowned socialite. She was an art patron. She was a businesswoman. She lived in Chicago at the time, and after her husband's death in 1902, she decided she somehow became enthralled with Florida, and she moved south. She moved down to the Sarasota area in about 1910. She bought up like 90,000 acres down there. She got heavily involved in ranching and farming and growing citrus and gardening. And then she later purchased 19,000 acres in Hillsborough County in what is now the Temple Terrace area, and that's where our little history kind of starts with her. She established what she called River Hills, which was a hunting preserve and a ranch. And at the time, she built a hunting lodge, she built some bungalows, she built outbuildings for servants. She put up a water tower that could support a town of 500 people, which was like a big hint towards she probably had some ideas for the future.
Are any of those things still there, like the water tower, the hunting lodge? Are they still there?
No, the only remaining structure from her era is what's now known as Woodmont Clubhouse. And at the time when she was there, 1910 to 1914, around that area, we think it was stables is what we think it was used for at the time. It eventually, in 1923, it was converted into Temple Terrace's first school, and it became an elementary school in 1923. And then I think it was a school through the 40s, and then other schools in Temple Terrace were built that were bigger, because this is a small little building. And eventually it was saved 2 different times by civic groups, and now is home to what's known as the Woodmont Clubhouse Association, which is 3 different civic groups that are housed there that use it for a clubhouse.
Okay, I was gonna say, what is it now? So it's like a social.
It's a great wedding venue.
Yeah, we've had some planners and they probably planned weddings there before.
Yes.
So how did the orange groves actually tie into the history of Temple Terrace?
Well, when Bertha Palmer died in 1918, and her holdings were sold to several gentlemen who established a development team and a company called Temple Terraces Inc. And one of the principals, his father and himself, were very involved in the Florida citrus industry. So they had the idea to combine selling property to build a home on in Temple Terrace with a giant orange grove. They built a 5,000 acre orange grove, which was the largest orange grove in the world at the time. And if you bought property in Temple Terrace, you had the option to buy parcels of the orange grove along with your property, and proceeds from the operation of the orange grove were paid to you as a homeowner to offset the cost of your house.
Oh, wow.
So
interesting.
You don't hear much of that kind of thing going on anymore today, but yeah, that was kind of a unique aspect of the way they promoted and sold Temple Terrace.
And you were talking about her being on a show or being featured in a show as a main character?
There's a program called Hell on Wheels where they're building the railroad across the United States. And apparently, Mrs. Palmer plays an active role in that. Of course, you know, with a lot of license, I'm sure. But it was interesting. It was kind of fun to see a name that we all throw around at home.
Yeah, you have to watch something like that if you live in Temple Terrace for sure. So how did the Great Depression change things in Temple Terrace? Like, how many people would you say were resident of the city? Because you guys became a city in 1925, is that right?
Right, the city was incorporated in 1925, and it was even prior to the Depression that the city suffered some setbacks. The Florida land boom, the real estate market crashed and pretty much crashed in 1926. And in 1927, a freeze came and wiped out the orange grove. And then the Depression came in right after that. So I guess everything happens in threes.
Yes.
But basically, Temple Terrace pretty much went dormant for a while after that. And it actually took one of the major investors in the original development to step in and issue bonds and try to keep the city going as the whole country suffered through the Great Depression. So it was, they sold those, they put out those bonds, and eventually the interest couldn't be paid on. So citizens actually banded together and bought out the bonds, the last of which wasn't paid off until 1940. And then of course you had World War II. So it wasn't really until after World War II and in the 1950s that Temple Terrace really kind of sprang back to life again.
Some kind of major mark on the map, right?
Yes.
If you will.
Yes.
Why do areas like Temple Terrace separate off and become incorporated? Just curious question.
My guess would be, at least in terms of the way our little city started, is like the original principals, like Bertha Palmer, the entire development team, Vance Helm, Berks Hamner, and D. Collins Gillette. These were serious movers and shakers for their day. I mean, Bertha Palmer's access to her personal connections to finance and all sorts of things, all from up north. I mean, they were bringing down people by the bus loads from up north and from around Tampa and St. Pete as well, but coming to invest in the property that was going on. So this wasn't like something real local that was going on. These were serious movers and shakers that were involved in the beginning.
Seems like maybe they just want to have their own rules and their own little, I mean, when you own 19,000 acres, you could have your own city, right? I mean. Yeah,
I mean, 19,000 acres was a huge tract of land. With,
it still is a huge tract of land.
Well, I mean, for one person to own.
Oh, yeah.
So to give it perspective, it's like where Temple Terrace is now, those 19,000 acres were bordered on the east by the Hillsborough River, on the south by what's now Bush Boulevard, on the north by Fowler Avenue and parts of Fletcher, and it went all the way out almost to Nebraska Avenue, which now encompasses USF, Busch Gardens. Just, it's huge. That's all about all I can say.
I love hearing stuff like that, and I like when I, of course, had to go look in MLS and pull up Temple Terrace Estate and see like specifically exactly where that was. So you see little things like that all the time in the legal description. You know, we're writing contracts and that kind of stuff, and it's just, I love to hear the history behind that little legal description, because there's always a story behind the name and that legal description.
And remember, we just mentioned a few minutes ago, Temple Terrace seemed like it was a long way from Tampa. So I'm sure that to be that separate from the big city of Tampa, you needed to be your own, you need to be in charge of yourselves. And
right.
So therefore they said, all right, let's do this. Let's make a city and let's make this happen. And I'm glad they did.
Yeah, it was a destination community. It was kind of like back then, if you lived in Temple Terrace, you were kind of up and coming too. It was the place
It's a well-to-do area.
Yeah, it was kind of like I think as it started, it was kind of going to be like a little enclave for wealthy Northerners to come down and winter at. Is kind of how it started.
Well, we have to take a quick break. We're at the bottom of the hour. When we come back, we're going to talk about a lot of the green space that you guys have in the Hillsborough River and some of the beauty that I think only Temple Terrace has. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, here with Sherry Donahue and Tim Lancaster. You guys just straighten me out if I mess it up. We'll be back in just a minute. Nothing like mixing your names up.
Doing okay so far?
Yeah. Having fun?
Yeah.
Easier than you thought it would be?
Yeah, I haven't stumbled yet.
No, you haven't stumbled. You know your stuff. You know all about Temple Terrace.
I stumble on my own words sometimes. I've been doing it for a long time, so don't feel bad. It's all good.
So who are you watching?
No idea. I didn't put that on. Well, welcome back, and you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. In studio today, we have Tim Lancaster and Sherry Donahue, two amazing guests sharing all about the city of Temple Terrace today. So delighted to have you guys in the studio. Again, I just want to say thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
So talk about, who mentioned Tree City USA, actually? Who was that? Was that you, Sherry?
That might have been me.
It's probably both, but go for it.
So chime in, guys. Tell me about Tree City USA designation.
Well, we have a beautiful canopy of trees. If you've not been to Temple Terrace and you decide to drive and come away from the corner of Bush and 56th Street and drive down the shady streets, you will not find a street, well, maybe one, two, that doesn't have at least a canopy somewhere along that street. And so, but the good news about that is that it's gorgeous and it's beautiful and it's shady and all that. But the bad news is that those trees have been there a long time. And so several years ago, a city decided that it would start replacing that canopy. And much to the efforts of Preservation Society, they started doing that and really got the whole city involved. And I believe now the goal is to plant 1,000 trees in the next 5 years. And
Wow.
I believe we're halfway there. So right now, if you're a resident of Temple Terrace and you don't have a tree in your front yard, or if you have, like I do, an aging oak, and I want to be prepared for when that tree comes down, you can ask for a tree. You can get a free tree, and there's a variety of trees that you can choose from. A group of volunteers come to your house, bring the tree, plant it for you, give you instructions on how to take care of it, and probably, I think I've seen Grand Rimby out there a few times, walk by, make sure it's doing okay, maybe give it a little bit of extra water if need be. But
These are already grown, started trees,
these are
not
started
little
trees.
seedlings.
These are not seedlings. Tim, what are they about? I'd say about at least 4 to 5 feet tall.
Yeah, they're usually 15-gallon and 30-gallon pot trees. I can add a little bit to that. It was like
My thumb is so not green. I would be like, no, I can't take the tree. I will kill it.
well, that's the good thing about the tree programs in Temple Terrace. The Preservation Society also has what's called a Trees for Preservation program. Grant Rimby, he's a sitting council member too, but he's always been a civic activist, a fellow officer in the Preservation Society. He kind of started planting trees a long time ago. And one day I was actually out helping him plant trees and for preservation. He goes, this is a preservation effort. And I was like, I'm the president and I've never even heard of that. What's going on with this? So we kind of formalized it a little bit. And so I've personally managed and planted and watered probably about 15 or 20 trees, helping Grant, because Grant's been doing it for a long time. Grant, almost on his own, has probably planted about 200 trees in the last 10 or 15 years.
That's amazing. I love that your city council people are so involved.
Very involved.
I love that.
Very.
I want to talk about your book too, that you wrote with Grant and Lana.
Okay.
Lana or Lana? Have I right?
Lana.
Images of Temple Terrace. Where did the idea for the book come from? Where did some of the photos come from?
Well, the way that it kind of fell into our laps, Arcadia Publishing, the company that puts out these books, it's a series of them. They're all over the country, and they actually contacted, I believe it was either the city or the Chamber of Commerce, looking for somebody to author a book about the history of Temple Terrace because one didn't exist. They certainly didn't have one in their series. So then our group, the Preservation Society, was contacted by the chamber, and so we volunteered to produce the book. It's basically they're the publishers. They basically tell you how many photos you need and the length of the captions and that sort of thing. So you basically have to just fill in.
So you dig and look and sort. And
yes, I like to say Lana did most of the writing. I count myself as a research monkey, is what I call it. And Grant grew up in Temple Terrace. He went away to college and he came back and immediately began collecting historic artifacts and photos and articles of Temple Terrace when he came back from college in 2001. So he had a pretty significant collection.
Now, is your group trying to put together some type of a history museum with historic pieces and stuff?
That's a long-term goal that our group has in partnership with the city. We would like to develop a City of Temple Terrace historic museum. That is something that, like I said, we would partner with the city, would hopefully be able to provide the structure to house the museum, and we would provide the content and the programming and docents.
And let's talk about the river, because the river is amazing. I mean, I have clients that live on the river, that we've sold property, we've rented property on the river, and it's still like, it's beautiful, especially when you get around the time of sunset, you know, when you get some of those lights that reflect. It's just really any time of day, but it's just so beautiful. And if you've ever been down the Hillsborough River in a canoe, which I have, and anybody's lived here for any period of time, that's
the good
really
news about our respect for the river is that you will not find it used in any way inappropriately. And when I say that, you know, you might think, my goodness, what could she possibly be talking about? There are homes on the river, there are parks on the river, there's a school on the river, a huge park, River Hills Park, it's a huge park, has a boardwalk on it. So we're not allowing industry or any businesses to be based on the river, because that is such an integral part of our city. And we've really done and I hate to keep using that word amazing, but that is why we're called the
Amazing
Amazing City.
Right?
That's our theme, exactly. But you know, we've made sure that it's been there for our citizens. And we have a group dedicated called the River Watch Task Force, and they are appointed by the city to keep the river in front of everyone, making sure that we recognize that we have to take care of it, we have to monitor it, we have to look at different initiatives that could come before us that could be detrimental to our portion of the river. And so we take it very seriously.
And I don't know what you guys have done to maintain the water flow, but I mean, you know, recently we had, what was it, 25 days back-to-back torrential rain. I mean, it was more rain than we had in over 65 years. And I mean, you guys did a great job. I had talked to clients I have there and no one flooded. So I don't know what you're doing with the water, but
I wish we could take credit for that, but thank goodness we have the Swift Mud, and we have Florida, and we have the bypass canal, and we have agencies and who are taking care of that.
But you work collaboratively with them, I'm sure, right?
We do. We work with them very closely because we are living and playing on the water. We may be the first ones to notice that something is amiss. And so therefore, the partnership is very strong.
So what's one of your favorite things in this book? I'm looking through this book here, Tim, and it's got some really cool pictures. I'm looking at midwinter outdoor dancing and just super cool things like that.
Wow.
What's one of your favorite things that you talked about, wrote about, have pictures? I mean, these are, I forget the word you used earlier, but it was very spot on. Looking at these pictures from, I'm sure there's dates here, 19 something. What'd you say? You can tell the furniture's older and just it's beautiful. It's got the wood beams in the ceiling and.
I would say the original country club structures would probably be some of my favorite. During the club opened in 1923. When all the stuff that happened to Temple Terrace happened, eventually the original country club clubhouse was sold and turned into a college. It's now the home of Florida College, and that main building you were looking at there with the wood beams is now known as Sutton Hall. And the college is actually has started a restoration effort to kind of restore it back to its 1920s appearance. But it was a very beautiful and grand building. It was designed by renowned Tampa architect Emily O. Elliott. He designed all the original public buildings as well as homes for the first 7 officers. and directors of Temple Terrace. But I would say the architecture in Temple Terrace is some of my most favorite parts, along with the river, because I mean that's why Bertha Palmer picked where she did to put her hunting lodge. It's on the most beautiful part of the river. There's bluffs that actually, that's where the terraces come from. There's actually bluffs that run down behind the college, and that goes on throughout different parts of the river. A lot of the river, like Sherry was saying, there's houses on some sides, but other sides are left completely natural. So the birding and the boating, and especially in kayaks and canoes, it's just beautiful and gorgeous there.
This has been, I mean, this book really is amazing. It's too bad some of these, were any of these pictures in color, or were they all black and white?
All black and white.
They were.
Yeah.
This is the time.
These are all during all the images in this book are pretty much from the 20s, maybe a few maybe up into the 40s, but they're mostly all from the 20s. There's a company called Burgett Brothers that covered a lot of the whole Tampa Bay region, but they were just a treasure trove of resources. In fact, Grant had managed to get his hands on what were originally called sales books, and basically they were like photo scrapbooks of just photos of Temple Terrace scenes. And when they built the first homes, they took photos of them and used them kind of as real estate marketing tools as well to help sell. Another cool thing about Temple Terrace when they originally were building it is whatever the designs were for the house, they would only allow 2 of them in the city. So like my house, it has they would allow one on the north side of Temple Terrace Highway and one on the south. And after that was done, and you had to get a new design, So there's no cookie cutter, it's all different.
I love those old brochures and stuff. And we had TBBA, which is Tampa Bay Builder Association, a while back, and they brought one of their old brochures. Amazing stuff. I love looking at that stuff. We're going to post some of your pictures on our website at tampahometalk.com and also on our Facebook page. When we come back in a few minutes, we're going to further talk a little bit more with Sherry and Tim about Temple Terrace being the city for living, their new tagline, and what you guys have shaken up over there. We'll be back in a minute.
City for Living is our old tagline.
Oh, well, you can correct me, please.
And you're right, we're at we're just a little over 26,000 people. So I don't know who told me the 28,000, but it's okay.
We're holding steady at 20.
But you know, the funny thing is, in 1970, we were at 7,400 people.
Yeah, how many?
7,400 people in 1970.
Wow.
That's all?
That's all.
Wow.
So when I moved there, my kids, my unborn children, 7,400 people. I thought, I didn't.
We're ready.
Realize it had grown so much. I mean,
how long was the last segment, Chris? 12? That's what I was thinking. Okay. Well, welcome back, and you're listening to Tampa Home Talk with a special edition today, highlighting and featuring the city of Temple Terrace. And our special guests in studio today are Tim Lancaster and Sherry Donahue. So delighted to have you guys. Such a rich history in Temple Terrace. And please correct me with the tagline, Tim.
Yeah, well,
I said the city for living, but that was the old one, right?
The city for living was the previous tagline. The current one was Temple Terrace, living city since 1925. Because a lot of people don't realize we actually are an incorporated city over in our little neck of the woods.
And you were sharing some of the stats over the break, Sherry. Like Temple Terrace has grown a lot in 40 years.
they really have. In 1970, we were at 7,400 people. And
So less than 10,000.
My husband and I bought our house in 76, and we thought it was a bustling little town. Well, now it really was a small town because now we're at roughly 26,000. So we've definitely grown. But yes, and Tim's right. We used to be called a city for living, and that was a good fit for us for a long time. And we really are just that. I mean, we are a wonderful place to live. And just a few statistics. We have 420 acres of our, 4,732 total acres. 420 acres of those are for our parks and recreation.
You guys are big on Parks and Rec.
Big on Parks and Rec. We have 5 swimming pools, 10 playgrounds, 8 soccer fields. I mean, I can tell you, we have 1 golf course. but it meanders through the entire city. So there are a lot of people who can say they live on or near the golf course, and people take advantage of the golf course. They expect that, you know, that beauty is there for everyone, not just for those playing golf. But we also have some other things that are pretty amazing, as long as we're going to go that far. And you're right, we did change it to Amazing City because we had done such a great job of keeping ourselves a secret, that there, as the times change, we were beginning to see that as residents grew up and moved away, or they got old and passed away, or moved away for whatever reasons, that, you know, we wanted to make sure that people realized who we were and what we were. And we are very proud to tell people that if you move to Temple Terrace, we'll make room for you. We will say welcome, and we're happy that you're here. But some of the things that we brag on constantly are our services. So our police and fire. And we did a survey a couple of years ago, matter of fact, 14 years ago, seems like it was just yesterday. The city decided that they would commission a survey. And then eventually they came up with Vision 2020. And they did a survey and they named it Your City, Our Future. And so they asked the citizens, what is it about Temple Terrace? Why is it that you live here? Why do you want to live here? Why do you encourage people to move here? And they almost to the man said, services. So police and fire were right there at the top. Right after that were the amenities of the Parks and Rec that we talked about before. But also, you know, what was surprising to me, although made me feel good, was that the involvement of the community, that people felt that they could get involved. And there were lots of ways that they could get involved, from, you know, your Rotary Club to your Civitan and your local PTAs and churches. I mean, the list is long. So if you're looking for something to do, if you want to get involved, there's a place for you.
It's interesting how the city sort of started out as a social club, right, Tim? Like pretty much that's what she brought in there, and it's still a lot of that exists today.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are a lot of people who, when you say to them, "Oh, you're a country club city," would bristle at that. And
well, I think the definition of country club has kind of evolved.
Yes,
over the years. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would also say, you know, even being, you know, Sherry, besides being a council member, is also very active civically, and in my involvement with civic stuff. With as small as we are, it's like our clubs, you know, we kind of overlap. We partner in different events and things together. So there's a strong core of the community that's really engaged and participates. You know, I mean, I've had informal accidental meetings with city officials right in the aisle at the grocery store. It's like, what's going on with such and such? It's that kind of access that's kind of special, that you become actually friends with your elected officials, and not just, you know, folks up on the dais.
Collaboration is huge, and I love how, I forget how we worded it when we were talking about it before the show, but we were talking about how, you know, you love the city and now you actually serve the city. So how you feel about being in public service, but also as a citizen.
As a citizen. Well, I always felt as a citizen that the elected officials were good stewards of my taxpayer money, because I could see things in progress. I could see the Parks and Rec, I could see our police, I could see our fire, I could see all those things being taken care of for me. And so now that I'm sitting on that other side, I'm recognizing how huge that responsibility has been. And it is not something to be taken lightly. And as Tim pointed out, there are many conversations that happen in the grocery store, after church, at the park, going for a walk. People feel like they can stop you and say, hey, what do you think about this? Which is my favorite part. It's not so much, hey, I don't want you to do this. It's, what do you think about this? Have you all thought about doing this? Here's an idea. Maybe the city should try this, which is exactly why the city went to the residents and said, hey, what do you think of us? Tell us what we're doing right.
I mean, that really is the definition of public service right there. Like, you're reaching out to the citizens of your city, asking what they want, what they need, and collaboratively working on things you can do to make it better. What are some of the changes and stuff that you guys are working on? What's some of the things that you have changed? Some, we were talking about different ordinances and, you know, backyard chickens and different things like that. Yeah.
Now, we said we were going to talk about backyard chickens.
The movement.
The movement,
That's
yes.
got quiet.
Right. No, you know, backyard chickens, it's amazing. If you think back to the 50s when the city was really growing, everyone who looked for a house wanted a carport, and they wanted a lot of jalousie windows so they could open those windows and let the air flow through. Well, then by the 80s, it was 2-car garages, and heaven forbid you didn't even open your windows, because by then everybody was air conditioned. And so now things are different. People are looking for different things, and it seems like now people are looking for a place to not only work, but to live in that same area, to be able to play in that same area. And so the city is poised to make those changes. Now, we're not going to change all those beautiful neighborhoods that we have, but we are looking at different ways that we can invite people to work and live in our city who don't look for that 1950s house that I live in, or looking at 1920s house that Tim looks at.
Now, I'm ashamed to say I don't know. I don't know of any new construction that is in your area. And do you guys even have the land?
Oh, yes.
You have some land.
Oh, yes, we sure do. We actually the city purchased the property to build that downtown that we almost had back in the 20s.
Yeah.
We're working on that.
It was laid out in the town plan, but unfortunately only like a couple buildings were built before everything got the big kibosh.
Right now, we're working with Hillsborough County Economic Development officials and the Tampa Economic Development Council, along with the blessings of Hillsborough County, to bring businesses to Temple Terrace and to build that downtown. So we're not sure what it will look like. We have a vision of what we would like for it to look like, but what we do know is that we are a viable city, and we would like others to join us for the future.
And we were talking a little bit about some of the events that you guys have, some of the ongoing events that you've had for a long time, some things coming up and some new things. You guys want to chime in on that?
Sure. Well, why don't you talk about the Hickory Hacker Golf Tournament? Okay.
Well, actually, as part of the Preservation Society's, so our main fundraising event, but also as a way to pursue our mission of educating the public about our city's history. We began historic golf tournaments this year. In February 2016 will be our 6th year. We started off with what we call the Hickory Hacker, which is an amateur golf tournament.
Is that somebody like me that just does not know how to hit the ball and like you're hitting it 15 times?
Well, the deal is even people that play golf and are adept at golf, the tournaments are all played with 1920s era hickory shafted golf clubs and replica gutta perca balls. And in fact, it's not mandatory, but we request that the players, male and female, wear period attire. So the men are wearing like newsboy hats and ties and knickers, and the ladies wear long dresses and hats styled from the 20s.
How cute!
So the deal is, it's like even when they're out there playing golf, they haven't played golf like this, most of them. So, and a lot of them actually become like hickory converts. And there's also statewide, nationally, and even internationally, there's hickory golf associations. And our tournaments, after we did our amateur one, we connected with a gentleman named Mike Stevens, who's a teaching pro, and he wanted to have a professional tournament to celebrate the anniversary of the Florida Open. So then we now have an amateur tournament, pro tournaments, and it's all done in the hickory style. And also, as part of the weekend's event, we have what's called the Knickers Bash, which is a Gatsby style dinner dance.
What is that exactly?
Well, Jim Barnes, the original golf pro, instead of dressing for the evening like you were supposed to back in the 20s, he liked to just stay in his knickers and go to dinner. So we call it the Knickers Bash because we encourage the golfers that come to stay in your knickers and just come out and not get all fancied up like for the evening. The women wear like 20s flapper dresses.
How cool.
Yeah, and so it's basically, the idea is for the people to come and experience what the country club lifestyle in Temple Terrace was in the 1920s.
Gotcha. And a couple things that you have, the art festival you've been doing for a long time now?
For 42 years, we've been putting on a 2-day art festival. It's a Temple Terrace Arts and Crafts Festival. And it is a 2-day event, and it's always held the first full weekend of November. But we also have a wonderful 4th of July parade and our own fireworks. We have a program called Temple Terrace Reads, which is on October 10th, which focuses on literacy. And then the newest and most fun event,
Second most fun event,
is the Craft Brew Fest. And that's sponsored by the Rotary Club, and that will be in May 7th of next year.
Depends on if you're crafty or not, right?
Hey, you know.
Hey, you never know. Someday maybe we'll get some craft beers over at the
Right. Well, we have live music. That's an outdoor event as well. It's live music, craft beer sampling. We had.
You got your 19th hole all set up. I can see it.
We're ready.
It actually, the event, the first year it was held was literally right across from the first tee of the golf course.
We sold out first year.
Awesome.
So it was an inspiring day to find out that we brought so many people to Temple Terrace who maybe had not ever seen it before, and found out that Rotary is not your grandfather's club anymore. This is for all ages. So we, like I said before, we are open for business. We want people to come and check us out to see what it looks like. We have a race in November called Trot Through the Terrace, and that's the one that I was mentioning that people came out and saw it. As they ran through the shaded streets, they came back to us and said, oh my goodness, it's so shady, it's so beautiful. So
let's not forget to mention Lipton's. I think I told you they catered my wedding, so
they are still there.
One of the oldest businesses there in Temple Terrace.
Ralph and Nancy Lupton are still making barbecue, and they used to have a moniker, Smell That Smoke. Remember that?
Yes, do. Love where you live, or I'll fix it. I'm your host, Katrina Magel. Thank you so much for joining us today as we spotlight the beautiful city of Temple Terrace. We'll be here same time, same place next week. If you missed the show, check the whole thing out on the podcast at TampaHomeTalk.com on the radio, or just hop on over to your podcast player. Thanks so much for joining us this week, Tim, Sherry. You guys were rock star guests. Thank you so much for spotlighting Temple Terrace.
Thanks for having us.
This week, we're out.